3, a collision on the Houston Ship Channel back in 2019. A loaded gas carrier, Genesis River, outbound, T-bones the Kirby tug Voyager, which was pushing 2 loaded barges of Reformate northbound in the barge lane on the red side of the channel. So this is a 2-pilot job for the Houston pilots. The first pilot undocks the ship, and then around here on the chart, the second pilot takes the con and they relieve each other. So this is a 754-foot long ship, 122 foot wide. It's got a draft of 36 foot 10 inches, even keel, loaded. So the MPIX at the dock consisted of the captain, the mate on watch, and the 2 pilots. And the pilots insisted on silencing all alarms. They wanted a quiet bridge. And now this ship's ECDIS didn't have the function to actually silence alarms. So the captain told the mates to turn off ECDIS 1 and ECDIS 2 and put both radars in standby. They undocked uneventfully. The conditions were good. Wind and current were not a factor. All gear working properly. They met a few ships on the way out. Lots of barge traffic. PPU of the pilot at the con on the Genesis. These screenshots are from Bowditch Navigation's Wheelhouse 2 software using an Invicta GPS antenna. That dial on the right column is rate of turn and not the rudder. So at this point, which is right at the Bayport flare, pilot number 2 has the con and had been conning for maybe 20 minutes or so. He had asked for extra RPMs with 15 minutes of notice. He got 72 to 73 RPMs. He was doing 12 plus knots, basically sea speed. Now, in deep water, this ship, when it's doing 12 plus knots, only needs 60 RPMs. But of course, with this UKC, it needed 72 RPMs. So consider some ship handling ingredients here. Even keel gas carrier, under keel clearance is 3 to 4 meters. It tends to squat by the bow. The passage plan of the ship contains squat calculations at 6, 8, and 10 knots, but not at 12 knots. So this ship was trimmed by the head all the way out. Let's look at some multiple screenshots, and we're going to look at the NTSB reports graphic of the sequence of events, what was said. So the BW Oak is an inbound gas carrier in ballast that the Genesis River met right at the flare of Bayport. You've got one ship doing 12.8 and the other one doing 12.6. This Genesis has a swing to port. His stern is grabbing that bank. The BW Oak made his turn at the flare. Both pilots said they were comfortable with that meeting position and their distance off. So now in the next 60 seconds, the pilot on the Genesis tells the Voyager, keep an eye on me. Then he asks the mate on watch, give me more RPM. And then he tells the Voyager, go to the greens. Genesis with that port swing, bank effect. Drives across the channel. This is at 15:14, just a few minutes before the collision. And so there's the Voyager in the barge lane. The Houston Ship Channel is 1,000 feet wide from those fixed markers, with a deep water channel of approximately 535 feet. Each barge lane is about 230 feet wide, and that's where this Kirby Tug Voyager is moving northbound. This Genesis is taking bank shots. Now it's got a huge swing to starboard. He's already committed to this Voyager go to the greens to cross his bow, thinking he wants to meet starboard to starboard. Now, this tug has a draft of 10 feet with his barges. Our Genesis has 36 and 10. Impact. The Genesis is at 9.2 knots. The Voyager put her rudders over hard left, full ahead. On the wheelhouse camera from the Kirby Tug Voyager. Miraculously, no one was injured. This Kirby Tug broke her lines on both of these barges. One of them turned turtle, one of them was cut in half, and the tug floated free. So let's look at the sequence of events according to multiple rudder orders. He asked for extra RPMs, which he didn't get. He was on 72, 73 RPMs. In the course of these bank shots from the Bayport flare, he went from 12.5 knots down to less than 10, just from that hydrodynamic effect. So where's the captain of the Genesis in all this? He's in his cabin. So is pilot number 1. And so right after the Genesis, pilot said, "Give me more RPMs. Voyager, go to the greens." He tells the mate, "Get that other pilot up here." And then the mate, of course, physically leaves to get the pilot and also calls the captain, who comes to the bridge just seconds before the collision, as well as the second pilot. The Genesis pilot conning says stop engines just a few seconds before impact. The captain shouts out full astern, and it wasn't until it hit around 9 knots at the moment of impact that negative RPMs actually kicked in. There was no use to the anchor at this moment. The second pilot went out to the wing, called VTS, called the pilot dispatchers, asked them to close down the channel. In the NTSB investigation, the Board of Pilot Commissioners conducted their own. They looked at soundings. This one here from January prior to the incident, comparing a survey taken days after the collision. This one shows unknown shoaling, increasing the slope of that bank, and to them explaining the bank shots and the loss of control of the ship. So let's look at what happens with the NTSB and Conclusion here. Pilot's decision to transit at sea speed, increasing the hydrodynamics of the maneuver. #21. Lawsuit. Kirby sues the shipowner of the Genesis River. Determines that 100% negligence on the part of the Genesis River. Speeding, operating without a radar, and failing to maintain a safe position. Violating inland navigation rules. So where does this come from? Well, we have to go back to the NPIX, at which the pilots insisted on silencing the alarms on the ECDIS and the radar. The captain's decision was to turn the ECDIS off and the radars on standby. What wasn't revealed to the pilot was the ship's passage plan, which had in writing a maximum speed of 8 knots for this transit. The judge sees that, and the pilot deciding to go sea speed at 12 knots, resulting in a collision. You were going too fast. So this brings us back to risk management, situational awareness. Let's move on to our final case study, the American Liberty.